1916. A German prisoner of war camp. A young Korean man closes his eyes and he sings. He never made it home, but the song he left behind is still alive, 110 years later. Here is what makes this story extraordinary. 10 years before Japan banned Arirang, this song was already being preserved in an archive on a distant European continent. Who recorded it? Where? And how? Today, we follow that strange and haunting journey. To understand how Arirang ended up in a German prison camp, we need to go back. Back to 1914, the First World War. The largest conflict in human history. Along the Russian Far East, in a region called Primorsky Krai, lived a community of Korean settlers. These were Koreans who had fled their homeland after Japan seized control of the peninsula. They had Russian citizenship. They had built new lives on foreign soil. They would one day be called the Koryo-saram, the Korean diaspora of the Soviet Union. But when war broke out, the Russian Empire issued a draft order. Every Russian citizen was called to serve. These Korean men were no exception. They had no homeland to fight for, no country that claimed them. And yet, they were handed Russian uniforms and sent to the Eastern Front, thousands of miles from Korea, thousands of miles from anything they had ever known. Their names had already been changed. Gregory, Stephan, Nikolai. Korean men, Russian names, fighting someone else's war. And then, somewhere on the Eastern Front, they were captured, taken prisoner by German forces, brought to a camp deep inside Germany. In 1916, an unusual visitor arrived at the prison camp. His name was Albert Dögen, a German linguist, an ethnographer. Dögen was on a mission, one of the most ambitious archival projects ever attempted in wartime. He wanted to record the voices of the world. Armed with an Edison wax cylinder phonograph, traveled from camp to camp, recording prisoners from dozens of nations, their languages, their songs, their stories. He was building a sound archive of humanity. And then, in the corner of one barracks, he found them, 3 Korean men, Gregory and Stephan, Nikolai. Dögen set up his equipment, he positioned the brass horn, and he asked them to sing. Think about that question for a moment. What would you sing if you were a prisoner of war, thousands of miles from home, in a country you had never heard of, fighting for a nation that didn't even consider you its own? And Stephan closed his eyes, and he sang Arirang, the song that Japan had not yet banned, the song that carried the weight of a nation that no longer existed on any map. And it wasn't just Arirang. The recordings from that day also included songs carrying the spirit of resistance, the longing of a people living under occupation, songs a displaced Korean would choose, in a cold barracks with no way home. The recording was made. The wax cylinder was labeled, and Stephan's name, age, hometown near Vladivostok, all written on an index card. That card still exists today. The cylinders were transported to Berlin, to the Humboldt University Sound Archive, the Laut Archive. And there, they slept, through the end of the First World War, through the rise and fall of the Third Reich, through the division of Germany, through decades of silence. Nearly 100 years later, German archivists began the painstaking work of digitizing the Laut Archive collection. cylinder by cylinder, voice by voice. And from one dusty wax cylinder, a melody emerged, ancient, mournful, unmistakable. Arirang. Recorded in a German prison camp in 1916, now preserved at Humboldt University's Lautarchive in Berlin, and introduced to Korean audiences through the National Folk Museum of Korea. Arirang had been recorded in Europe 10 years before Japan even thought to ban it. No one could stop it. When the war ended in 1918, the prison camp gates swung open. But for Kim Gregory, Stephan, and Nikolai, there was nowhere to go. While they were imprisoned, the world had collapsed around them. The Russian Empire, the country that had drafted them, given them citizenship, sent them to die, was gone, destroyed by the Bolshevik Revolution. Their Russian passports worthless overnight. And Korea, still under Japanese colonial rule, a homeland that could not take them back. They were ghosts, neither Russian nor Korean, claimed by no nation, wanted by none, stranded in the middle of Europe. Historians tell us their fates diverged in two directions, both brutal. Some made it back to Soviet territory, but Stalin's government was watching. Any man who had spent time in Germany was automatically suspected of espionage. Men who had endured a world war, survived a prison camp, were arrested by the NKVD, labeled spies, sent to Siberian labor camps, or executed in the snow. This is not speculation. The mass purge of Koreans under Stalin is one of the most documented tragedies in Soviet history. Others never made it back at all. They drifted westward, through France, through Belgium, taking work wherever they could find it, underground, in coal mines, breathing black dust, speaking to no one in a language they understood. They died as strangers, in countries that never learned their names. And Stephan's index card still exists. His name, written clearly in fountain pen, his hometown, his age, his religion. After 1918, the record goes silent. Historians have not been able to determine which fate was his, or where he is buried. He never made it home. Hold two images side by side. 1916. Inside a prison barracks in Germany, young men who had lost everything held on to one thing, a melody. They pressed it into wax and left it behind. 2026. In concert arenas across the world, tens of thousands of people are singing Arirang together, spontaneously, without being asked, without being told. Perhaps the song that survived a prison camp has found its way here, to this moment, 110 years later. No one could erase it. Japanese prohibition, the smoke of the Eastern Front, Stalin's purges, the darkness of coal mines. A century of silence. He never made it home, but his song did. This has been Hidden Kingdom Files. If this story moved you, subscribe and join us next time. Korea's hidden history is still waiting to be found.